Hello, everyone. My name is Alex, and it is my big pleasure to warmly welcome you all to the opening talk of AI Helps Ukraine on behalf of all the organizers. We are really thrilled to have Dr. Timnit Gebru with us today. But before introducing our speaker, I would like to kindly ask Gebru and all the audience for a few minutes to briefly introduce the charity conference AI Helps Ukraine. Go ahead, Sasha.
Thank you, Alex. Hello, everyone. My name is Sasha, and as a member of the organizing team, I'm very happy to welcome all of you here and tell you a bit more about our conference. AI Helps Ukraine is a charity conference in AI, where we bring together the leading AI experts to present recent advances in their research and raise funds to support Ukraine with aid. So we're hosting a series of online talks starting from today until early December. And on the 8th of December, we will have a full day in-person event at MILA Quebec AI Institute in Montreal with keynote talks, panel discussions, and networking. You are very welcome to register to our online series at our website. And for the in-person event, the registration will be open soon, so stay tuned for further announcements. And registration to our conference is free, but in the same time, we're asking our audience to donate. And your donations will be used to support Ukraine with medical and humanitarian aid. As many of us may know from the news, the ongoing war has caused a severe humanitarian crisis in Ukraine, destroying civilian infrastructure. Unfortunately, the war is not ended yet, and right now many of Ukrainians live in the destroyed areas near the front line, and they in need of basic things like food, shelters, warm clothes, and medical aid. And the main goal of our conference is to join our broad AI community to support these people. Therefore, we encourage you to get involved and make your donation on our website, which you can find in the donation button. AI Helps Ukraine is organized by a group of early career AI researchers and friends taking personally the situation in Ukraine. We know firsthand from our friends from Ukraine the challenges that people are facing there, and we believe in power of our broad international AI community. We know that together we can make a difference and save lives. And our main partners are MILA Quebec AI Institute, and they kindly support us with logistics and venue, and a Canadian nonprofit organization, Ukrainian Medical Support. Together with them, we to purchase and deliver humanitarian aid for Ukraine. So one more time, please donate us, and thank you for being with us today. And I give the floor to Alex to introduce our today.
All right, thank you, Sasha. Everyone must be impatient to listen to Dr. Gebru. Just let me quickly mention some basic house rules. So everyone is, of course, welcome to use the crowdcast on the right of the screen for discussion, comments, sharing papers, whatever is on your mind. And you may also use the Q&A feature, also on the right, you can find it, to ask questions for the speaker. And we will take of the talk. And for those of you who are using crowdcast maybe today for the first time, you can also upvote the questions of the people. We, the organizers, are deeply committed to making this virtual conference an inclusive, diverse, and safe space for every participant and the speakers, of course. And we kindly ask you to actively help us in this endeavor. Therefore, and according to our code of conduct, hate speech or harmful comments will definitely not be tolerated. And yeah, now without further ado, I would like to introduce the very first speaker of AI Helps Ukraine, Dr. Timnit Gebru. For those of you minimally interested in the social aspects of artificial intelligence, Timnit surely needs no introduction. She's a prolific and influential scientist in the area of responsible AI, broadly understood, where she has contributed not only sharp, deep, and timely analysis of the harms of AI, such as stochastic parrots that most of us know, and she has also provided us with best practices and guidelines to practice AI that are very positively influencing and shaping our field, such as data sheets for data sets, even though everything's going at a slower pace than many of us would like to. And then if I give you the usual biographic list, it only speaks for her solid experience in AI, PhD from Stanford, postdoc at Microsoft Research, co-lead at ethical AI at Google, And meanwhile, she had time to fund Black in AI, serve in the board of Addis Coda, and recently she founded the Distributed Artificial Intelligence Research Institutes, which we're hoping to hear a bit more about today. I'd like to thank the contribution of Dr. Gebru to AI Helps Ukraine, as she knows firsthand the consequences of war, which of course and unfortunately is not only occurring in Ukraine. Dr. Gebru, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate what you're doing here, and I wanted to be here to show what we call transnational solidarity, and talk a little bit about basically some of the issues that we should all care about in terms of misinformation, disinformation, what we're seeing on social media, hate speech, how it's related to this particular conference and the goals of this conference. I think we should all be educated in that. And depending on how much time we have after that, I'll also talk about some of the other projects we're working on. So let's get going. I'm going to try again to share my slides.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, slides, browse, and what do you know? It just worked. Okay,
great.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Okay, so yes, I founded DAIR. DAIR stands for the Distributed AI Research Institute. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to do, the first word that came to my mind was distributed, as in distributed around the world, because one of the last people I hired into my team, actually at Google before I got fired. So we hired him, and then 2 weeks later, his manager and me got fired, and then a couple of months later, his next manager got fired. Poor guy. His name is El Mahdi, and he's Moroccan, and his sister was actually in Ukraine. And I saw him really trying really hard to get Google to care about YouTube and the havoc that it was causing in Morocco, and he was just unable to do it. So that was one of the ways in which I saw how important it is to have people from different parts of the world that many people might not care about or might not think is important when we are analyzing the harms of AI or even the quote unquote potential benefits. And without that, we really can't have a full picture of what the technology is doing. And so that was kind of one of the reasons I wanted to have a distributed AI Research Institute. So given the this conference and what we're talking about today, I want to tell you a little bit about myself really quickly and where I come from. So my parents are from a small country called Eritrea. It's in the Horn of Africa. It's at the top there for those of you who can see these slides. And I was born and raised in Addis Ababa. It's the capital city of Ethiopia. And, this was the only place that I considered to be my home. And then when I was 15, there was, in 1998, that is, a war broke out between Eritrea and Ethiopia. And so many of us just had to leave at that time because those from Ethiopia, those of us of Eritrean descent from Ethiopia had to leave. Those people of Ethiopian descent in Eritrea had to leave. And so that was just a very kind of sudden uprooting that I had from my country, and then I was a refugee and came to the States eventually, and then I experienced all of the issues in the States. So I want to take this opportunity to say a little bit more about what is happening right now in Eritrea and in Ethiopia. So that little yellow region right there, that is the Tigray region of Ethiopia. that is the northern state of Tigray. So Ertra is, a place that is obviously close to my heart. It is the land of my ancestors, but many of us have been cut off from this land and basically exiled. Ertra has the longest detained journalists in the world, with over 360 detention facilities, many of them underground, in a country that's 45, kilomiles squared, right? Very small, has more than 360 detention facilities underground. People even all dissidents have been disappeared, and people even get imprisoned in shipping containers in temperatures that induce one's skins to be stuck to the walls. It's the only country in the world that has never had elections, has never instituted a constitution, no parliament, no free press. And it has been called the North Korea of Africa, but it actually surpasses it as the most censored country in the world. And it's illegal to leave Eritrea for people between the ages of 5 to 55. And right now, and there's a shoot to kill policy for anybody who's trying to leave. And right now, it's actually way, way worse, because there is a war that's called the world's deadliest war that the Eritrean government is a key actor in. And in fact, there was a news story just recently where the soldiers went into a church and were forcefully conscripting not just church worshipers, but people like deacons and stuff that were working in the church. And so there is indefinite conscription to the military starting at 16, with decades laboring with little to no pay. And so people like the UN, organizations like the UN, have called this modern day slavery. So anyway, so if to know more about this, you can watch a documentary called The Sounds of Torture. And one of our fellows at DAIR, actually, this is about her work. If I have time, I'll talk to you about it later. There's also a documentary called Escaping Eritrea, which shows why people go through such lengths to escape. So when asked, the producer of the documentary said the reason he wanted to create this documentary is he wanted to understand why the biggest migrant group to Europe was from Eritrea. With no internal known war at the time. This documentary was created before the current war started. And now I want to tell you a little bit about what this war is that I'm talking about, which unfortunately has not gained, not nearly the news story that it deserves. And it's very painful to have our day-to-day be that and have it be invisible. So this is the war in Tigray, and this region, Tigray, has been under complete communications blackout for 2 years by the Ethiopian government. So that means no internet, no phone, no electricity, no food, no medicine. And so as of March 2022, so this was in March, and I guarantee you that things have only gotten worse now. An estimated 500,000 Tigrayans had died. 500,000. This is an estimate, right? I guarantee you it's actually more than that. More than 70,000 Eritrean refugees were unaccounted for. So like I said, Eritreans are just trying to get out. And so many of them were actually refugees in Tigray because, they share a border. But 70,000 of them right now are just unaccounted for. We don't know where they are. Tigrayans all over Ethiopia are being held in concentration camps indiscriminately, from 6-month-old babies to elders in their 80s. As we speak, there's aerial bombardments on civilians with residential areas and even children's playgrounds being targeted. And when you look at state media and social media, it's full of genocidal language. Like they call Tigrayans weeds, cancer, termites, devils, daytime hyenas that need to be the last of their kind. And Tigray has been called the world's deadliest war and the worst disaster on earth. So I in the spirit of transnational solidarity, like I said, I urge you guys to learn a bit more about what's happening here, and make your voices heard a little bit. So, in terms of let's talk about, I guess, automated tools. Ethiopia has a population of about 110 million people speaking 86 languages. So when the war started in about November 2020, that was also around the time I was fired from Google about a month earlier. And at that time, I had already been seeing the escalating hate speech. I'd been seeing what was going on YouTube. And what really worried me was that not only it was a bad combination of people not caring about these regions, knowing none of the context, none of the languages, but also and also having no automated tools of any kind. So no toxicity detection, hate speech detection, any kind, because at that time, let alone any of these language tools, they had no language tech at all for any of these languages of interest. And so I was actually trying to get them, I was like trying to make a case for them to have some of this language stuff. So after the war was declared on November 3rd, immediately there was a lot of just rampant mis and disinformation. And at the same time, I was seeing some of the leaders in AI saying things like, social media would be guilty if it amplified hate speech and calls to violence. 94.7% of hate speech is taken down automatically by AI. 94.7% of hate speech is definitely not taken down automatically by AI. I guarantee you that. I mean, we're working on some numbers, but this is just not true. In fact, when I saw the report that Jan LeCun linked, it said that 94% of the hate speech Facebook took down, right, was taken down by quote unquote AI. But we're not concerned about the hate speech they took down. I don't care how they take down their hate speech. They could use aliens if they want to. We are concerned about the things that they're not doing. So I want to talk a little bit about what's happening here. We know that there were a lot of news stories and others about Myanmar and Facebook's role in genocide. And it was really difficult. I saw all of those news stories, but I never really internalized it until I started seeing it myself close to home, right? I have to say all of our friends and family members and students and everybody we're connected to is being harmed by currently what's happening in Ethiopia and Eritrea. So it's very personal for many of us. So when you see it happening close to home is when you really realize the scale of the issues. So in terms of Facebook, so right now there are so many different social media platforms, right? There's Facebook, there's Twitter, there is TikTok, there's Telegram, and many of them serve different kind of purposes. So it's kind of Twitter, most people use it to kind of interface with the outside group, right? That means you're trying to influence journalists or other multinational bodies or international bodies, and so you're spewing propaganda externally facing on Twitter. On Facebook, mostly there's a lot of internal facing stuff. So that is, you'll speak your own languages to your own followers because that moderation in languages other than English is near non-existent. So you'll have a much more extreme genocidal language, for example, on Facebook. So initially, basically, a lot of journalists kind of gave up on Facebook and migrated to Twitter. And this is still at the very beginning of the war. Twitter was just still a mess. So here is journalist Zakaria Zelalem, who was exiled, from Ethiopia, covering the war. He was talking about how, for example, there's all of these GAN-generated images, profiles spewing a lot of propaganda. So one of them was pretending to be a diplomat and having like pro-regime propaganda. And this was George Bolton with the name, with the GAN-generated image again. And there was this other woman. So there's a lot of these kinds of things. Is everybody hearing me and seeing the slides okay? Everything is cool? Okay, cool.
All perfect.
Okay, yes. And so there's all these journalists that were put on lists to be hacked and attacked, incessantly harassed. So every time there's a flood of fake accounts. So every time you say something, there's a flood of fake accounts and people responding and harassing them. So my colleague, Mahdi, the Moroccan colleague of mine that I was telling you about. So all of us, I have to tell you that all of us started doing research on social media by necessity. This was neither our interest nor, our expertise. So Mahdi is a theoretical computer scientist, but he was also a journalist, and he started his friends, journalists. Omar Radi, for instance, was one of the first people who was targeted by the Pegasus software. Some of you might know what that is. It's a spyware that was used to target journalists and dissidents around the world. So Omar Radi was one of these first targets in Morocco. And so my friend just literally started doing social media research on the impacts of social media platforms, etc. And he couldn't really get anybody to care about it, right? And so so these journalists are put on lists and incessantly attacked. And so Mahdi calls this tactic mute news. So every time people talk about mis and disinformation and hate speech, they don't really sometimes I think they miss some key point, which is one of the goals is if there is important news stories, they want to mute that, and they want to stop you from saying these news stories, and they want to confuse whoever is reading what you're saying or what you're not saying. They want to confuse everyone, right? So so this is one of the tactics. So there's always a flood of fake accounts or other paid people responding and harassing. And there's people with burner accounts sending death threats. There's proliferation of all sorts of fake news in addition to targeted harassment. So what they do is they will create a fake institute, and they register these fake institutes around certain names. And then they would write a fake report from that fake institute. And then that fake report would be proliferated all over social media so that people can cite it, so that it looks like, legitimate research sort of references. So these are some of the tactics. Anyways, when I announced that I was going to be giving this talk here, some of the organizers might have seen that there was just a flood of comments. I tried to, I wanted to show a video because I had a video of a screen cap of all of those comments. And one of them was this photo of this photoshopped photo of the Ukrainian army with a swastika. So one of the points I want to make here is that we are all connected. And so all of these conflicts and disinformation actors are all connected. So there was a lot of anti-Ukraine propaganda initially that was also being disseminated by a lot of these Ethiopians and Eritrean trolls that were that were trying to, they were very much, pro-Russian propaganda. And so, and you might know, or you might not, that Eritrea, right, was, the Eritrean regime was the only country in Africa that voted in against a UN resolution condemning Russia's actions back in March. And so that was the first time a lot of people, Eritrea was trending because a lot of people were trying to see what is this place, right? Whereas if we do care about some of these places, we can work together to work on that, stopping the harms, right? Together, because that's what bad actors will do. They work together across borders, right? And so if we don't care about certain areas and certain groups of people, what's going to happen is the harms are just going to proliferate without us knowing them. So this was just an example of the kinds of stuff that happens to me if I say anything about this kind of war. So since then, since November 2020, of course, there's been a number of news stories about the manner in which people talk about Facebook because. But actually, if you look at, for example, YouTube, it's really, really bad. But a lot of times researchers, text is much easier to analyze, right? You have videos. Imagine a lot of them are in other languages that people don't have any context over. because they don't care about these other languages, a lot of research, they won't even put resources into them, or people who have context. And then videos, you need to have text to speech, speech to text, and in addition to any kind of other analyses. And videos are very, very long, right? It's not, you can't just like look at the posts like you do Facebook and Twitter. Twitter is much easier to analyze than any of these other platforms. So I want to give you an example of this. In last year, around October, I believe, I was literally, I remember it was like Friday night, just shaking, because I was seeing a whole bunch of high profile coordinated accounts with hundreds of thousands of followers instructing people to go door to door and kill people. And they were instructing them, and they were telling them to do it now with urgency. And the words were like, even if you feel bad doing it, you should do it now. So the post was, first I reported it, and it was the automated translation actually gave you the gist, right? And then I immediately got a response saying that this post didn't violate Facebook's standards. And then I did a translation from point-by-point translation from Amharic to English, and I sent that post as a report. Still said it didn't violate community standards. At this point, I started like basically tweeting about it. I started talking to all sorts of journalists I knew, and so journalists started asking Facebook for comment. Why does this not violate your community standards? I mean, it was pretty awful. So finally, 18 hours later, after it was shared and commented to by hundreds of thousands of people, literally, they removed the post. That's it. They removed that one post, no other action. And so this was just one example, right? And so when I see these kinds of things, 94% of hate speech is taken down automatically by AI, and then I'm seeing what our communities are experiencing. It is actually very painful. And so a lot of times, so this was just a very clear example. Other examples are, let me give you another example. There was another one on Twitter by a really another high profile person, and these were the 3 words they said in Amharic. They said, clean up, weed out, together, right? Clean up, weed out, together. And the translation was correct, the machine translation. It was like that. That is what the guy said in Amharic. However, when you see the comments, people understood what he was talking about. And actually, some people were like, we're worried that innocent people are going to be harmed by this. So please, this is getting scary, right? But when you just look at the machine translation with no context, you're like, well, is he talking about gardening? Like, what is weed out? Like, this is fine, right? And that was what happened. A lot of times when people reported this post, it was exactly that. They were relying on machine translation, and they said this doesn't violate community standards. So I'm just trying to show you the complexity of this, right? You can't just say, oh, do machine translation, whatever. You have to take into account. So in work in science, technology studies, people say socio-technical systems, right? You have to look at technology as a socio-technical system where you look at the technology within the context that it's in, right? The geopolitical situation, who's building it, who's deploying it, etc. You can't just, analyze one specific thing and think about a technical solution. And I also want to give you an example of the mismatch between the reports that some of these platforms put and the reality. So here was data that I got from my friend Mahdi, like I said, so here it was a while back in February. They talked about how they removed 385 Facebook accounts for inauthentic Moroccan for inauthentic activity, right? So they said they also, frequently use these accounts to comment on news, pro-government stories, etc., including Truth TV. Truth TV is the most popular YouTube channel in Morocco, which my collaborator, my friend, believes needs to be taken down. But YouTube still hasn't acted. Now, they said they removed 385 Facebook accounts, and actually researchers, my friends and others, found at least 15,000 accounts, right? So even when they say they've taken action, 385 is such a small percentage of these 15,000 accounts. So this is the scale of the problem we're talking about. So again, 94% of hate speech is not taken down by AI. Here's, content moderation there's a lot of issues already. And so our director of research at DAIR, along with Maliha Ahmed, who used to be a content moderator, have this very short talk, 20-minute talk that you might be interested in. But in addition, there's also like this is what I mean by you need to look at the geopolitical situation. Many of these companies are actually infiltrated by specific interests. And these companies are absolutely clueless about so much of it. So one example that I can tell you about is this example of the UAE office, right? Twitter bots have been implicated in crimes like the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi. And for instance, this British newspaper revealed a Saudi journalist had died under torture in his country after Twitter's Dubai office allegedly disclosed his identity to the kingdom's authorities. The journalist, he ran a Twitter account which exposed human rights violations by Saudi authorities and royals. And he was arrested in March 2018 and died. And there are, I personally even know of multiple cases of infiltration that the companies are so completely just clueless about. And so these are the kind of complexities that we're talking about. So now that I have said all this, let me tell you about a little bit about the DAIR Institute. This is exactly why I wanted to start the DAIR Institute, because I want to work on things that I want to start with people, right? People's, I don't want to start from technology and trickle down, right? Assume that there's a specific technology that helps people. We want to start with people and see if there are things that help those people. And we want to start with our communities who are extremely neglected by any of these platforms or technologies that we're talking about. If you're talking about language tech, none of our people are benefiting from it, right? If you're talking about platforms, you can see the kinds of things that are happening. So let me say a little bit about our values. We have a few values. One is, like I said, community, not exploitation. Research can be a very exploitative process, and I'll give a few examples of that later. So for instance, you have situations where academics go into specific locations or communities, extract certain kind of knowledge or data, right? And kind of advance their careers and tenure and whatever, and those communities are left with nothing. And this happens in many ways in research. And honestly, if I'm thinking about graduate students and postdocs and everybody who makes these academic institutions work and how much they're paid versus, like the full professors, that's to me already a form of exploitation, right? So I think that, for DAIR, I'm thinking about, okay, how do we have a non-exploitative research philosophy? The other value we have is healthy, thriving researchers. If you're going to be publishing every other deadline and you're always stressed out and I think, research needs to be a very creative process, a long-term process, and you can only do that if you're thriving and you're healthy. If you're not, then you, I think, are doing, local optima, right? You're kind of really fast doing the next thing and not really thinking long term. And that's also not good for thinking about ethics and responsible and other things that we're talking about. Comprehensive principle processes. This is the kind of stuff like that was mentioned before, like, you know, data sheets and model cards and testing processes and things like that. We want to have for each work that we do, we want to have a good way of a framework of analyzing its harms and its impacts before we put it out there. And finally, proactive programmatic research means that we don't believe that any kind of technology is inevitable. We don't want to start from the tech. We want to start from the people. And you start from the people. If there's something that helps them, you work on that based on people's needs. And if something is harmful, we stop it, right? We don't believe that things need to exist just because we've been marching to a specific aspect, a type of technology. And so, like I said, oh, I just heard something from my dogs. You can ignore them, or maybe you guys didn't hear it. But so it starts from the people for me. There's a few groups of people at DAIR. So we have a mix. It's an interdisciplinary group. We have a mix of researchers, interdisciplinary researchers, so social scientists, you know, NLP, people doing NLP, computer vision, machine learning, etc. But also people who help their communities. So like Meron, she's a refugee advocate. She helped more than 16,000 refugees, single-handedly gotten them out of human trafficking situations. And so you can, if you want to learn more about her work, there's a documentary like I mentioned earlier called Sound of Torture. Adrienne actually was a labor organizer and a delivery worker at Amazon. So she has firsthand knowledge of how these surveillance systems, quote unquote AI-based surveillance systems, affect workers, and she was one of them. And Meron has a lot of knowledge on not only transnational repression on social media, but also how refugees, you know, are face a lot of surveillance, like I said, by AI systems like electronic border walls or drones or many of these other systems that they're they face. So when I think about DAIR, you know, I come to this tweet. We're in the part of academia where you can have tweets in your talks. And so we, you know, Karen Howe, she used to work at MIT Tech Review. It's a journalist I really admire. She's currently at Wall Street Journal. But she said, you know, when a company like Google, Microsoft, or OpenAI builds these huge models so that they, our benevolent tech dictators, get to exclusively decide what kinds of problems they want their models to tackle, that does not make the world a more equitable place. Name one technology in history that has successfully been redistributed completely equitably from the bastions of privilege and power to the have-nots in society. We have yet to achieve this with even the most basic resources like water, paper, electricity, and the internet. And so I want to think about how do we start from the bottom, right? How do we think about technology or other things that help people at the bottom first, rather than, you know, at the top. And this is a good example of, you know, the kinds of incentive structures that we have. And this is a paper by, like, this is an article and a paper by Amanda Lin. It says machine translation shifts power, right? So she quotes this other journalist that says, the most important thing happening in Silicon Valley right now is not disruption. Rather, it's the institution building and the consolidation of power on a scale and at a pace that are both probably unprecedented in human history. So really, what I'm thinking about in the early stages of DAIR right now is institution building and how to decentralize power, right? Not how to help consolidate more power, but how to have a bunch of different smaller, more distributed kind of institutes and others or startups or whatever, where power is more decentralized. And to me, that's very important, because here's another series that I recommend by Karen Howe. This was her last series before she left MIT Tech Review, there is, and her series is called AI Colonialism. AI is creating a new colonial world order. So I spent a lot of time on social media platforms because this a time of war and genocide, and I'm seeing all of the impacts, and I'm having firsthand knowledge of it. But there are many kind of cases where the goal is scale, right? It's a goal that's assumed to be good in general, and so the assumption is that you automate things as much as possible, and as a corporation, you'll make lots of profit because you're not going to have as many people per thing that you're building. People are much more expensive than automated systems. The issue right now is that there is so in doing that, they're actually treating people like machines, right? And so behind all of these models and things that we're talking about as AI, there are armies and armies and armies of people around the world who are exploited, who are getting paid barely anything, who are being treated like machines. And that itself, first of all, that is exploitation that we should consider in our work on fairness or responsible AI, etc. But also, that has a lot of implications for the types of issues and products that we're seeing. So we wrote about this recently, called, this article called "The Exploited Labor Behind Artificial Intelligence," and it was mostly actually based on Adrienne Williams' experiences. And so Adrienne, like I said, was a labor organizer and also worked as a delivery driver for Amazon. Mila, she worked with data laborers in Syria, in Bulgaria, many of them Syrian refugees, right? Imagine victims of all of this war and hate speech and all these things we're talking about, and now they're, working to help build these AI systems that then, are used to surveil them. So given what we were talking about earlier about content moderation, I want to give you this example. So just recently, there was a Time magazine article about content moderators in Kenya. These content moderators worked for a company called Sama. It was a third party, but they were doing work for Facebook or Meta. And so the content, and so one of them was fired for trying to unionize and ask for better working conditions. 8 Ethiopian content moderators quit in 1 week. Imagine you are seeing all of this hate speech, genocide, constant horrible content online over and over and over again. You're getting paid, I believe it was like maybe $5,000 per year. And you're getting tracked and monitored. You don't have any sort of mental health support. You have all this PTSD. And in this example, they were, monitored through surveillance software to ensure that they make decisions about violence in videos within 50 seconds, regardless of the length of the video. I'm not sure how many of you have done, research in this, but you can't do that. How are you gonna, if you have a 2-hour video, how are you gonna make decisions about hate speech in that video after just seeing 50 seconds, right? If you have, so this exploitation of the labor is directly resulting in harmful platforms, right? So here, Time magazine says, through its prioritization of speed and efficiency above all else, Time magazine reported this policy might explain why videos containing hate speech and incitement to violence have remained on Facebook's platform in Ethiopia. So this is Daniel. And so, like I said, to me, if one of the key points and what we say in the article is that we should really think of transnational labor organizing and labor exploitation as a key issue in what we call responsible AI or ethical AI or AI ethics or whatever you want to call it. So, we need a different paradigm to build systems that help us, right, and that are not based on our exploitation. And I like this example. I use it all the time because I love a lot of things about it. And this was also written in Karen's series, where this company, Teku Media, created a data set for language revitalization, right? For Mari language data. And the way they did it was they created, from what I understand, a competition where people, so the Mari are, they were colonized, right? And they couldn't, speak their language. That's kind of a lot of what happens in many colonized countries, right? You can't speak your own language. You can't, if you speak it in school, you're going to get beat up. If you, so then the language starts dying. And there are many, our histories are many times oral, like orally passed through poetry, through music, through all sorts of stories. And so when a language dies, it's not just the language that dies, it's also the important histories, right? I learned so much about my history, Eritrean history. I don't learn about it, from books. I learned a lot about it from, poetry and stories. And hey, your great grandfather and this, that's kind of how you learn about it. And so what they were trying to do was revitalize this language, and so they had a competition, and they were able to have people send 300 hours of annotated audio, right? So from what I understand, it's speech and then transcripted text, so that they can build all sorts of language tech, like speech to text and other kinds of languages. Language tech. And so when they gathered this data, another company wanted to buy this data or license this data from them. I forgot. I don't know if it was buy or license it, but anyways, they they said no, and they published their rejection along with a video explaining why they rejected them. And they said, data is a final frontier for colonization. They suppressed our languages and physically beat it out of our grandparents, and now they want to sell our language back to us as a service. And so now there's a whole bunch of these, Mari principles of Mari data sovereignty, a whole bunch of these guidelines. They came up with a license that I was looking at the other day. There is this indigenous data sovereignty and policy book, which is, I believe it's like 256 pages from what I remember. And that's to stop all of this exploitation that goes on as part of research and as part of many products that people build. So here's one example of said exploitation. Actually, this just happened a few weeks ago or a few months ago. I don't remember. I just saw it when, so this is another example where Standing Rock passed a resolution banning this Lakota language consortium, right? And so these people, what they're saying is that they go from the outside to these communities and they extract knowledge from these communities, right? So they said they were misleading our elders into believing that first language speakers grossly undercompensated and unattributed expertise will freely benefit our language learners, when in fact, their products are generated for sale to our own people and to a global commercial audience without any provision to protect or maintain sacred stories or knowledge as an inalienable, non-transferable collective. So I'm starting to see a lot more of these kind of collectives. This is another one called Masakani, a grassroots NLP community for Africa by Africans. This is, Ghana NLP, a similar kind of initiative. And so, for me, I like these kinds. There was another platform that I saw that was built. I believe it was probably by the same people who did this, Teiku Media, and they, I think it's them, I'm not sure. They built a platform to help smaller indigenous communities create language tech for their own communities, but actually do as they please with their data, right? Guard their data. So they built this kind of platform. I like these kinds of initiatives that are, putting hands into various, power into the hands of various communities. So I'm just gonna close right there, because it's like yeah. So I said that if I had time, that I would talk about other projects, but we don't have time. So I'm gonna just close here and say, there's a few things I want to say. And I had other projects that that would make this a bit clearer. But right now, what we call "quote unquote" AI is heavily based on data and lots of people. But it's obscured when we talk about things like chatbots or other kinds of things. We talk about them as if they have their own agency. We don't talk about them as if there are lots and lots of people involved in creating training sets or labeling sets or any other kinds of stuff. And this is also this shows not only in the media, but also in our conferences, right? Data work is considered like second class. It's just a data set paper. What was the algorithm? I don't know how many of you have heard that. And I've had this issue many times too. And I was happy to see the NeurIPS data sets and benchmarks track. I had been really advocating for something like that. I heard that Neil Lawrence and others were starting a machine learning data journal just to analyze data sets and their careful curation, all sorts of issues that you have there, because many of the problems that we talk about have a lot to do with the way we construct data sets, the people involved, the way they're exploited, so many things have a lot to do with that. So if we want to make strides, we really have to bring data into a first-class citizenship, right, when we're analyzing our works. And many marginalized people are actually exploited and when working for creating AI systems, whether it is their data being taken from them in an exploitative way, like we saw with Standing Rock, whether it is their labor being used in an exploitative way, and then they're surveilled, right? And when they're trying to migrate or when they're trying to work to be more extractive. So when people say AI for social good or something like that, unless we think about the root of why we're building things, how we're building them, where the money comes from, what it is used for, to me it becomes like, I call it like retrofitting a tank, right? If you have all of your money coming from military entities, for example, and your goal is warfare, right? Autonomous weapons. If we think about self-driving cars and all of that, they were always, funded by DARPA because they was interested in autonomous warfare. And so that happens, and then at some point we say, oh, we want to do AI for social good. Then it's like, oh, we built a tank. We did all the stuff to build a tank, and now let's think about tanks for social good. Maybe tanks for agriculture. Maybe tanks. That's not what we want to do, right? Let's not build a tank. Let's think about something from the very, very beginning. And finally, what I want to say is that all of our work is political, right? Saying AI helps Ukraine is a political statement, right? That can be a statement that's disputed by other groups, but we think it's important to say AI helps Ukraine, right? Our work is political, and so we shouldn't pretend otherwise. When we pretend otherwise, it means that we are making assumptions that are part of the dominant political paradigm. So, so we can't say, oh yeah, don't bring, I'm always many times told in my talks and my work. Oh, I remember one time someone said, you're weaving in and out of activism and science. That there's no such thing, right? So there is a term called the view from nowhere that queer feminist scholars talk about when they're critiquing the way we work on science, right? Assuming that science and technology is built from no one's point of view. It is built from someone's point of view, right? And we need to make that explicit. So with that, I'm going to stop and say thank you for inviting me. And if, I'll stick around for questions if people have any questions.
Thank you so much, Timnit. That was fantastic. It was very inspiring, and I think this could go much to say about all this. I personally have questions I would like to discuss, but I would like to start from the audience. I don't know if you have time because we're
I'm sorry. I'm going to I can stick around. Yeah, I can stick around for sure.
Okay, thank you so much. We really appreciate that. So there was a question. The question, the most important one is, I don't know if you can see it. I can read it for the audience. So what do you think about change from the top down to bottom up in the context of an AI research institute? I guess like AIR, DAIR.
DAIR, you can call it DAIR.
DAIR. Okay. Would the results be better if students got someone like Joshua Benjo to help them on initiatives like stipend increases, mobilizing people, going to climate marches, or if the students organize community to achieve those initiatives?
Right. So where is the question? Oh, okay. What do you think about change from the top down versus bottom up in the context of an AI research institute? Would the results be better if students got someone like Joshua to help them on initiatives like stipend increases, blah, 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 or if students organize community to achieve those? I think that, I've talked to Joshua for a long time now about certain things. And whenever you have powerful people, I think it's good to try to bring them in, right? Sammy his brother has been, he made a stand when I got fired from Google. And I have to tell you that initially I was constantly fighting with Sammy because, he was a director at Google and he was not seeing all the issues that we were facing because that was not his day to day. It took him a very long time to start seeing the problems. Once he started seeing the problems, he couldn't unsee them. And then, of course, he started having issues because that's how it works. You're in a system, you go against the system, you start having issues. But if you're able to get powerful people on your side, it always helps. The problem is that powerful people don't want to be uncomfortable. And so, if someone has to decide, and let me tell you right now, if I go tell Google, or if you tell a specific professor, you need to increase people's stipends by 50%, what you're telling them is with the same amount of money that you have right now, you'll have less students, probably less papers, probably whatever, and you got to do it because you're a good person off your own volition. I wonder how many people are going to do that, right? What you want to do, though, if you have a student body that organizes these demands, you make it impossible for them to say no. They have to listen to you. You build a coalition and they have to listen to you. So that's what I advocate for. I advocate for bottoms up community building. Try to bring the powerful people with you, but you really need to build a coalition because for a lot of people, it's inconvenient. It's inconvenience that you're making them inconvenient. You're not making their lives easier because if you're powerful, that means your life is easier than the powerless. So in order to make it impossible for them to refuse, you have to build a coalition. So that's what I've done in my entire career. I've never gotten anywhere without building coalitions.
Yeah, thanks. I guess that's also the power of finding like allies, the power and building the force from the bottom up as well. We have a slightly different question next, more like technical. So it's a question by Lucia Berger. Do you think new improvements in processing long audio Whisper AI process? I think this was asked during what you were talking about.
With video?
Yeah.
I think I'm not exact. We're building. We have to build a whole bunch of stuff from scratch. Basic language tech, basic things. Start data collection. Do the whole spiel. So I'll tell you how that goes. But I think that we can't get out of. If the mindset is that first we'll do something for the dominant language and then we hope it trickles down, or for the dominant thing and then hopes to trickle down, I just feel like that's always going to get us at a place where we're not going to work towards equity. We're not going to work towards, helping people at the bottom, right? And so so I think whatever it is, it, you know, I advocate for having to work on a specific application specific things with specific communities, right? So to me right now, I'm not even sure if you know, like there are a lot of assumptions that are made in kind of other language technology, which I'm not sure would you know, translate for our purposes, right? We're gathering like data sets to figure this out. So so I don't really know if things like Whisper AI could help with this process. I actually don't. I don't know exactly what. I'm looking it up. I don't know exactly what it is, but what is Whisper AI?
I'm not sure.
I don't know what Whisper AI is, but
maybe more generally,
well, it says, yeah, it says new hearing system that gets better over time. Okay, I'm gonna look at it. But the thing is, so there's always pros and cons to everything, right? That we have to think about. Like even when I'm thinking about speech to text, so 100%, yes, we need, you know, we do need, you know, improvements in long audio processing, 100%. Right, for the purposes that I'm thinking about, which is like, you know, analyzing long YouTube videos, whatever. We can't even do keyword searches. Like, let's say I want to do, I want to see if a specific word, n-gram frequencies, very basic stuff, right? Like if how many times a specific word exists somewhere. I can't do any of that in the languages that I'm interested in. There's nothing that there's no, you know, model or data set right now that I can use to do that. So we have to do all of that from scratch. But now imagine that we make that more efficient. Now we're also making it much easier for surveillance. Like we're making, you know, surveillance systems much more efficient, right? Like people can, you know, analyze, I don't know, whatever I say for like a certain amount of time to actually target me. So I think there's like pros and cons to all of the things that we're talking about, right? Which is why I advocate for trying to think about things like application specific things. So whatever we do for social media analysis, I even wonder if it's good to make it open source or anything like that, because it could be weaponized against you know, the same communities that we might be wanting to help.
Yeah. You have a couple more minutes.
Oh, is this okay? I see. How AI can be used to fight misinformation online. I think that yeah. So, you know, again, like you build a tool and then it becomes a problem and a, you know, potential solution. So I would have preferred to be in this situation where we didn't have to use AI to fight misinformation, right? If we didn't rush to build social media platforms the way we did and like scale them and, you know, no regulation, whatever, we wouldn't be in a position where we now have to figure out how to fight misinformation, disinformation. But in order to like we do need some automated tools to fight this, right? So for example, even just basic language tech for different languages, right? That people don't care about. There is a lot of, even if we're talking about in the context of Ukraine, there is a lot of anti-Ukraine propaganda in many different languages and diaspora communities that nobody seems to care about. And so I think that having that language tech could help. But like I said earlier, there are many times where that's not even that doesn't work, because even the translations don't tell you anything. So so that's one. There are many very like simple things. Like for example, Twitter, for example, had starting to have this image manipulated tag. I don't know if you guys have seen it. They don't apply it universally. So when somebody has manipulated an image, right? When they have photoshopped someone's tweet, let's say, they would take someone's tweet and add an image to it, to make it look like they tweeted something else. That's one example, right? So Twitter started having this image manipulation tag. So that's a good tool. If we could have a tool like that where you can look at, scrape, see whether it was a tweet or a post that they was manipulated. So you can do like some, image similarity metrics or something like that. So these are kinds of things that I think would help. The problem is we're always behind. We push out some technology, proliferate it, and then we're like sort of trying to figure out, what are things we can do. And so I think that AI would help, but it is not the main solution, in my opinion. Even in this case, you need to have people who are very familiar with the context. You need to not be infiltrated. You need to understand, what kinds of things you're dealing with. And I think that, definitely AI could help, even with the analysis, like, specific keywords, engrams, just even simple things could help. But I don't think it's the main roadblock that we're having.
Yeah, so some of the challenges you mentioned before about how would an AI system take into account the geopolitical context and this socio-political on a tweet or on a Facebook post or whatever, that doesn't seem that there in the near future. I don't know if there is hope for out there, but
yeah,
hard to
in terms of AI, it's complex.
Yeah.
What's my vision for DAIR? I'll answer that one. Well, I'm gonna. We have a very nice sentence that makes me smile when I read it, but I don't know how to do it necessarily. And it says, our vision is to have a technological future where everybody sees themselves centered and represented in technology, where it's used for joy, where it's beyond, to have a world that is beyond borders and margins and categories. So that's what I want to contribute to. So at DAIR, there's two things. So we have two pillars. One is to stop the harms when we see them, because I think that you have to do that if you want to think about a different future. And then the second one is to imagine a different way of doing things. And that could be institutionally, technically, it's broadly defined for me. Everything doesn't have to be like a mathematical or code kind of, thing. So in this case, it means both, doing research in AI that, with in collaboration with various communities, right? So for instance, whether it's maybe like low resource AI, I'm interested in machine learning, low resource settings, small data sets and small compute, whatever, those kinds of things. But it's not just technical, because a lot of times the process by which you do it can also be harmful to people. And I'm also interested in ways to put power in the hands of workers, right, or other people, marginalized groups. So one very specific example for me, which we read about in the Noema article, is very simple things like, for example, Turkopticon. Lily Irani and Six Silverman created this platform called Turkopticon a long time ago. I think it was 2013. And that was, they were researchers, they're academics, right? And they created this platform to help Amazon Mechanical Turk workers rate the people, right? You might have been, I was at the other end of it back then when I was doing my PhD. We would like complain about bad ratings and stuff like that. I wasn't thinking about the workers and what they were dealing with and how we were treating them. I was thinking about my PhD, my research, my data set that needed to be labeled, my budget that, that's small, and how big the number of data sets I can label are with my small budget. But these researchers were thinking the opposite. They were thinking about the workers, and they built a platform to help them communicate with each other, build power. So when I'm thinking about AI or whatever my other skills are, that's kind of the mindset I want to have. I want to figure out, how do I build tools that put power in the hands of people who currently don't have power? Yeah, yeah, I can send you links for the other projects I wanted to talk about. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. This is just a statement. AI developers need to work more closely with scholars of the humanities. I mean, 100%. And not rubber stamping. The other issue I see is when we talk about interdisciplinary. I mean, I have had to unlearn so much stuff I learned in graduate school and my undergrad and my experiences in startups, my experience at Apple, my experiences in, a lot of it has helped me, like my experience as an engineer, data sheets and all of that careful testing and, edge cases and all of that you have to do as an engineer. That was good. But then there's also a lot of stuff I've had to unlearn and learn new things from scholars in the humanities who are so, not respected. So I've been spending a lot of time doing that. And they need to have more power, right? If we collaborate with scholars in the humanities and we're always calling the shots, and then it's interdisciplinary, that's not real, right? And so I think that there needs to be an equal power sharing sort of relationship with them. And that's the problem, is that's not what's happening right now. All right, I think I'm going to stop there in terms of answers. I think you're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just saying that we'd like to thank you again for participating, contributing to AI Helps Ukraine, and it was a fantastic talk. This will stay here, recorded with the comments, with everything, if you agree to that.
Yeah.
Everybody will be able to see it.
Is DAIR already working to work on us? Yeah, I mean, I think I answered that earlier. We're definitely working on that.
Okay. Done. All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks to all the audience. Remember to share this with your friends, colleagues, and donate, because that's one of the main goals of all this.
Thank you. And I really appreciate what you're doing. And all my support, and we are all in this together, and it's awful. And I want to say it's not normal for us to do our day to day in the midst of conflict and genocide and all of these things we're dealing with. So, it's good to have spaces to acknowledge that.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Timnit. Bye, everyone.
Bye.